From the CISO series, it's Cybersecurity Headlines.
Breaking, Revel closed down. No tears were shed. Then ransomware hackers reportedly targeted 3 different U.S. water facilities this year alone. And Google gives away 10,000 free security keys to high-risk users. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing to you on this week's Cybersecurity Headlines. And now we get a chance for some insight, opinion, and decidedly some expertise on these stories and more from our guest, Matthew Southward, the CISO at Priceline. Matthew, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Rich. Great to be here.
All right. We want to also thank our sponsor, Tessian, for making this show possible. We'll be talking more about them in just a moment. And remember, if you want to get in on the live video, a little conversation, join us on LinkedIn Live. Go to David Sparks' account on LinkedIn, and you can find all of the goodness there. We've got about 20 minutes, though, so let's jump right in. This is the big story kind of breaking late last night, early today. Revel closed down. The ransomware group Revel has been hacked and forced offline this week by a multi-country operation, according to 3 private sector cyber experts working with the United States and 1 former official. Law enforcement and intelligence cyber specialists were able to hack Revel's computer network infrastructure, obtaining control of at least some of their servers. Some, including Bleepy Computer, believe this might be the end of Revel. They've shut down a couple times before. Obviously, we're having some problems, but Matt, this is a developing story. We're starting to get some of the details that in that initial Revel shutdown, the government may have already had access at that point when they booted up from backups. Much like a ransomware operation, they they kind of stuck in the back door. Certainly seems like either Revel is having a bad year or they're very good at playing possum. What's your take?
Well, I think it's great. Right? It's great to see what might be the full power of the U.S. government come after these actors. I wonder, did it take this long because they were a hardened target, or because the government was trying to get the right, clearances and signatures? Is the government going to be able to keep sustained pressure? Right, next time they do pop up. And I mean, it's great, but is there someone at the FBI that I can call next time that will answer, the call from the SMB or from the utility that's been ransomwared? I think it's fantastic, and I hope that the pressure stays on.
Well, to answer your question, at least on, like in terms of like gloves coming off, there's like this ominous line at the end of the Reuters piece. They broke the story where it just basically said like the military says like, yeah, like all rules are gone now. We can just go after these people. And we were kind of laying off because it wasn't our jurisdiction. And now as that's been identified as like a terrorist level national security threat, they're kind of going to town. So, but in terms of scale, I mean, that is a major question for sure.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Keep the guns blaring.
All right. Well, speaking of your infrastructure players here, ransomware hackers targeted 3 different U.S. water facilities this year alone. This comes from a joint advisory published last week by CISA, the FBI, the NSA, and the EPA. They got to get in on the advisory action. They revealed that 3 previous unknown incidents involving malware attacks on water systems throughout the country. The attacks occurred in Nevada, Maine, and California, and in all cases targeted the facility's supervisory control and data acquisition system, or SCADA, the ever-popular SCADA systems, the pivotal operational IT commonly used by large organizations to remotely monitor and manipulate industrial systems. So we are seeing, more attacks on infrastructure. Unfortunately, it was major news when we first heard about that first water plant, where someone was trying to increase the lye levels there. And, we're seeing other areas of cyber defense getting more sophisticated. Looks like this this infrastructure sector is a prime area for further exploitation. I mean, what are your thoughts about this being a serious Achilles heel in terms of, kind of looking at this national security picture?
Oh, sure. And I think it's probably even underreported as a risk, right? I think this has probably happened more times than we know about, and just poses a huge risk of disruption to, somewhere locally constrained. I think the conventional wisdom is that one of the defenses is a rather fragmented base of these utilities, but that just means that they're smaller. The utilities, there's no magic to preventing ransomware in these environments. It's the same thing that any IT expert would tell you: segmentation, right? Manage your systems, patch your systems, back up your assets. I think what might be missing, though, is I don't know if these utilities are able to reinvest in their security, right? Whether that comes from more bills to the consumers or some grants, I think that's the biggest risk, right? We don't know what's coming, and the utilities don't have a free hand to spend more time and resources to defend themselves.
With this kind of advisory, though, does that give them, at least these utilities, I guess, the cover
Sure,
or the motivation to start that ball rolling?
it should absolutely, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, next up here, Google gives away 10,000 security keys to high-risk users. The high-risk users in question are politicians, journalists, and human rights activists who are considered to be particularly at risk from state-sponsored attackers. Google is giving them hardware security keys to help them better protect their accounts from hackers. The keys are 2FA, also require a password. I guess that would be the two part of that. Google's announcement follows an alert they sent to 14,000 users that their accounts had been targeted by Russia-backed attackers. So, Matthew, we've seen a number of kind of large tech platforms. Facebook recently announced, an increased security policy for unintentionally famous people. They don't quite use high-risk users.
Yeah.
They say unintentionally famous for basically the same type of people. Is this something that Google should be doing? Is this more of a PR strategy for like this particular kind of disbursement of these keys? How effective can something like this be just based on this
Sure.
initial kind of push?
Oh, I think it's great that Google is doing this. I think it's unequivocated good. They said they had 14,000 users targeted, and they only gave away 10,000 keys. So I wonder about that other 4,000 folks. I think some companies who might have more lawyers would be worried about taking on liability by encouraging their users to use 2FA or to use this key. It's great that Google hasn't done that, and it's a great thing for a company like Google to get these into the hands of more users, and hopefully they build up some training assets around it, so that when they hand someone a Titan key, it's not just click this. It's here's how to use it, here's how to migrate it when you get a new phone, here's what activities are the riskiest. So I think it's a great thing for Google to do.
Yeah, it almost sounds like this has to be part of like an overall, I
Yeah.
guess, security training for these people, to best protect them.
Absolutely.
All right. Next up here, Twitter suspends accounts used for cyber attacks against security researchers. According to Google Threat Analysis Group analyst Adam Weiderman, 2 accounts were suspended for being used by North Korean hackers posing as security researchers who leaned on the hype of 0 days to gain followers and build credibility. It's the first time I've heard hype around 0 days being used in a sentence, but we're all hype beasts, evidently. The hackers also created fake profiles on Twitter, LinkedIn, Keybase, and GitHub, and used these accounts to communicate with security researchers and then lure them into an infected blog. Interesting to see, security professionals kind of targeted with this kind of social engineering. I'm sure there are way more than 2 North Korean hackers doing this. If there's 2, there's probably 200. But
Sure.
security researchers just as prone to kind of jumping on these attractive sites as anyone else. Is there any kind of takeaway that we can teach, I guess, the wider security community about how to be more cautious on these?
Security researchers I know are completely brilliant and often with a touch of imposter syndrome, right? And so like the appeals to vanity are an old con, and the smartest people are just as likely to fall for that as anyone else. I think some of these security researchers might focus a little less on being Twitter famous, on being hype beasts, right? Read a book about Theranos or Enron, or watch Catch Me If You Can. But I think one thing that you said that really struck me was these North Korean hackers were setting up GitHub profiles too. And I think that's somewhere that a lot of developers and a lot of security people are going to let their guard down. Maybe even if they wouldn't trust someone coming in through Twitter, someone with a little bit of a history in GitHub, you're just going to feel a little more comfortable. It feels like it's our space.
Mhm.
And I think, a little more caution and a little more confidence in yourself, it would go a long way with our community.
So the best security prevention is to believe in yourself.
Exactly.
You heard it here first.
The more you know.
The Bling. All right. Well, before we move on to our next story, though, I want to take a few moments to thank our sponsor, Tessian. Want to know more? Want to know what we learned from analyzing 2 million malicious emails? At Tessian's Human Layers Summit, you'll hear about new threat intelligence into the state of spear phishing. Guest speakers from Trusted Sec and KnowBe4 will discuss what kind of attacks are getting through typical enterprise defenses, what that means for user protection, and what security leaders need to do about it. Join in on the conversation to learn about what we discovered by registering now at Tessian.com/summit. All right, moving into the second half of the show here, Zerodium solicits VPN zero-day vulnerabilities. Exploit Broker, which is not at all an ominous description of your business, Zerodium announced its intention on Tuesday to buy zero-day vulnerabilities in the Windows clients of VPN providers ExpressVPN, NordVPN, and Surfshark. Zerodium is a company that purchases zero-day exploits and then resells them to government and law enforcement agencies. So when you explain it more, it doesn't sound any better. The companies also run a bug acquisition program where researchers can sell their exploits for up to $2.5 million. The bug acquisition drive was precipitated by increased use of VPN services by cyber criminals to hide their real-world location when connecting to victim networks. So my question here, the big problem here, and this is where we get in the problem with NSO Group and any number of these kind of companies, is whom and to which countries is Zerodium peddling its exploits? If it's to China, all of a sudden that gets all sorts of problematic for a lot of reasons. I am no way alleging that they are in fact doing that. I'm just saying that's like the worst case scenario. This seems to be a murky middle ground in kind of the security environment. Matthew, what are your thoughts?
So, well, first of all, I think these consumer VPN products are. I think consumers are encouraged to buy these products when they don't have a real risk, right? And actually, they're making a decision that they think improves their security when it increases their attack surface. When you think about Zerodium and who they're selling to, I'm glad I don't have to wade into the vulnerabilities equity market too much. But yeah, it's a risk, and they're not doing it for no reason, right? They've got a population they want to target who they think run this software. I know the article suggested it was ransomware operator crews. That's kind of the best case scenario. I wondered if a ransomware operator is really going to go pay for ExpressVPN. But if that's who they're targeting, that's great. I think for the VPN companies, like these vulnerabilities are only valuable when they're rare, when they're unknown. Right. So do the VPN companies run their own disclosure programs? Do they pay for vulnerabilities that have been reported? Right. Because once the VPN provider knows about it, hopefully they can address it and it becomes worthless to Zerodium.
Yeah, and a lot of these are based, I mean, no surprise here, are based on like kind of open source software stacks anyway. So I have to imagine, I mean, not. I don't think it's great that Zerodium is doing this, but yeah, I really like your point that this is the value in these is when they are rare. I think that's a good takeaway. Next up here, the FCC takes aim at spam texts. A report from RoboKiller highlights that more than 47 billion spam texts have been sent so far in 2021, up 55% from the year before. I believe I've gotten 1 billion of them. Acting on roughly 14,000 complaints, the FCC is considering a new set of federal rules that would govern spam texts and could include requiring phone providers to block spammers at the network level. So, we're seeing a lot of government actions in terms of cybercrime prevention, but this reminds me of the do not call list that was set up, in Canada. We have one in the US as well, but frustrated consumers signed up to be put on a list only to find out the list got transferred somehow to other phone spammers. You have that central point of failure. When it fails, it's not great. Yeah. So, I mean, could the same thing happen here with this kind of spam call block list?
Oh, sure. But it couldn't get worse. You got a billion. I get as many spam texts to my wife's name as I get to my own. I don't know what she signed up for. But earlier this week, I got a text from my carrier telling me it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and click this link. It's at the bottom, right? It can only get better, and there's no real way for consumers to report these texts at this time either. I know you can go to the FCC website, but that's unsatisfying. You assume it goes to a bit bucket. And just something would make me feel better when I get one of these. So yeah, please do something. Take my phone. I don't care.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of work on trying to defeat the robocall problem. We've seen,
Hmm.
shake and stir protocols and stuff like that getting
Sure.
implemented. I don't necessarily see that as an end user getting any better, but you're right. I mean, any effort on this is better than nothing. If nothing else, I get spam texts that are addressed to Martez, and it's gotten to the point where I kind of almost identify with that name at
Yeah,
this
you
point.
wish were. The other worst offender on spam texts is election candidates who I think have carved out an exception for themselves so that they can continue to text me even when nobody else can.
It's information for your
Yes.
your,
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
election. Yes. All right. Next up here, researcher finds consumer-grade IoT devices showing up on corporate networks. Increasing numbers of non-business Internet of Things devices are showing up inside corporate networks, according to Palo Alto Networks. And they know a thing or two. Their survey of 1,900 IT decision makers across 18 countries includes the UK and the US and found that 78% of them reported an increase in non-business IoT devices connected to an organization's network, including things like smart light bulbs, heart rate monitors, gym equipment, coffee makers, even pet feeders. So I think a lot of this has to do for the work from home situation, but it doesn't feel like that should be an excuse. As a CISO, do you find that 78% number to be surprisingly high or expectedly high?
I bought a upgraded robot vacuum this week, and now I have a complete map of my floor plan on my phone. It's fantastic. So I think 78% is completely uh, expected, it's just not surprising. I mean, the devices are so useful, right? I think if you think of these devices as a platform for attack on your network, you're not really doing the right threat model. I mean, sure, that's possible, but it's much more likely as a gateway to really traditional espionage, right? If something has a microphone on it that can be turned on through an app, that's what actually would concern me. I think I think it's not a direct threat to the network. I think it's more of a health and safety thing. The solution here is just kill corp. Like, your corporate network should be no different than Starbucks. Even if someone does bring in a smart camera, a smartphone, whatever, and turns it on, it should be isolated. It should just be on its own little VLAN. And don't expect that someone can plug something in and get fully privileged corporate network access.
All the VLANs all the time. And our final
Exactly.
story. I have
Oh
a
no, it's
networking
not
friend that's
over, is
probably
it?
yelling at me right now. Let's put it all over layer 2. Everybody loves
Hmm.
that. All right.
Hmm.
And our final story today, Fin7 tries to trick pen testers into launching ransomware attacks. We've got another social engineering story, always a good one. Fin7, the group famous for its ATM hacking malware, as well as for its role in the Colonial Pipeline incident, is creating fake cybersecurity companies that conduct network attacks under the guise of pen testing, paying legitimate IT specialists to map compromised corporate systems, perform network reconnaissance, and locate backup servers and files. This feels like for years, I guess pen testers have been trying to be like, we're legitimate, let us get our foot in the door, we can really help you. And now it's like the shoe is on the other foot here. How would this affect your approach to vulnerability management and pest testing, Matthew?
I think this is the explanation for the security skill shortage, right? We can't hire anyone because they've been employed by Fin7. Brilliant on their part, right? Game respect game here. Okay, the ransomware crews or the adversarial hacking crews are going to do whatever they can to find the talent. I still kind of feel like the greater threat is just the traditional insider threat. High. $1,000 gift certificate to someone who works at your company to look the other way. There have been companies trying to make that look legitimate. Share your email password with us, for a gift card. I'm still more worried about the insider threat than anything else. But if you did get hired by one of these firms and got burned, let me know. We might have an opening for you.
All right. Before we take off here, any kind of a favorite story or maybe an eye roller kind of story that kind of stood out to you today?
Oh, I think that last one, man. I love the idea. The other thing is it connects to the researchers getting trolled on Twitter as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are insecure people, and a little bit of a little bit of buttering someone up goes a long way to bring them into your confidence, and then do bad things to them.
All right. And Matthew, where can people find you if they are so inclined to check out more of your stuff?
Oh, LinkedIn, Twitter, at Bronx. I lived in the Bronx when Twitter was built and got an early account. And would love to talk to people. Instead of
All
a
right.
social guy.
Definitely check them out. One of the best Twitter handles I've seen. Thank you, Matthew Southward. Really appreciate your time, CISO at Priceline. And also thank you to our sponsor, Tessian, for helping make this show possible. Remember, you can come back next week for our Friday video chat, Hacking Secure Access, an hour of critical thinking about how to easily and safely connect to services and apps. That starts at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, followed by a meetup. And then our live content extravaganza every Friday continues, because we'll be back with another edition of the Week in Review, Friday, 12:30 p.m. Pacific, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. And remember, you can catch cybersecurity headlines every single day in your podcast app of choice. 6 minutes will get you all caught up. Check it out at CISOseries.com. Until then, I'm Rich Straffolino, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.